Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Today it is February 26th, about 10 o'clock at night here in China. And I finally have a little bit of good news to report to you, which is nice after so much bad news, but we'll get to that in a little bit. First of all, let's go over what's happening with life here. So these videos that you're seeing now were taken yesterday. I had to go out to a store that sells items that I can only get at this particular store. And as you can see from this video, the mall is pretty much empty. I believe I was the only customer in that entire wing of this particular mall, and I saw very few employees in there as well. They did take my temperature when I went in. Many of the shops are closed. I would say most are open, but I didn't see any other customers. So this is definitely taking a financial toll here. There's news articles about this. This is one of them mentioning here that only a third of Chinese small businesses are open. So that's going to be a huge mark on the economy that's really going to hurt a lot of people who are employed by these companies and people that own the companies that are trying to sell their items. So it's really taking a hit here, and we're not sure exactly when this thing's going to be over. So not at the good news yet. That's still bad news. Also, security is tightening, which is a little odd because the numbers, reported numbers, are lowering, or at least the new cases that are coming out every day are lowering. But we're definitely feeling tighter security here. So it is getting harder to move around in some areas, although some shops are opening. Going into residential areas is nearly impossible unless you live there. In some cases, they actually require all your ID, and they register when you come in. And in fact, yesterday I got a phone call from a neighborhood that I had visited, and they thought I lived there, and they wanted all my information. I told them, oh, I was just visiting, and they said, well, don't visit again, basically scolded me. So they're really strict on where you can go, your movement here, and that's more so than it was before. Before, they just had the one gate, but there wasn't any registry when you went in and out. Now, one of the reasons for this increased security, increased restriction, could be that Korea, which is nearby us, is having this epidemic. There are over 1,000 cases today. So this could be a reason. There's a lot of concern that Japanese and Korean tourists are going to be bringing the disease back to China. We've seen that in social media. So that could be one reason. But there's another possible reason, and part of it has to do with what we reported earlier. So it was reported on official media that there was these outbreaks of the coronavirus in prisons. And that's not just in Hubei, but actually half of the new cases, 250 cases, were in provinces away from Hubei province, and one of those provinces was ours. So the numbers suddenly had a spike. You can see it in this graph here. Suddenly, when those prison cases were reported, then those numbers went up. Now, obviously, those numbers should have kept going up because it's a prison. People are in close confines, often overcrowded, which I mentioned in the video that talked about this. I think it was 2 videos ago. But oddly enough, we're not hearing about them anymore. So today there were only 6 cases confirmed outside of Hubei province. So a little bit weird. If you have 250 cases, you would expect that to increase for a while and then go down, but suddenly it's down to 6. So these are just things that kind of puzzled me, and looking around and seeing the increased security, it's not difficult to put 2 and 2 together. And in fact, when I was looking for an updated graph of these reported cases outside of Hubei, I did some research, and I found out that actually that graph that I used earlier, that was from Worldometer. So I went back to Worldometer and I looked for that particular graph, an updated version of the graph, and this is what I saw. So that's also indicative. There's something going on with the numbers here. So there's a lot of, positivity here, a lot of celebration, and they have done an incredible job keeping this thing from spreading, but it's almost an impossible task when you think about it. Something that is so devious, this kind of a disease that can go so long without showing symptoms, spread so easily, and very quickly always be ahead of you, be a few steps ahead of you. So, how do you do it? How do you control it? So now let's get on to the good news. There is some good news here. And the first thing, as is seen from this article here, is that the CDC clearly is taking this seriously, which is great news. If you're living in the States, hopefully you saw this headline. Hopefully it's on the major news networks. But they did announce that it's not a matter of if this will hit the US, but when, which I think is absolutely the right mindset to have. And that is honestly the first thought that I had when I knew that this disease was happening in Wuhan, which is a major international airport, a major travel hub, not just for China but for Southeast Asia. That was the first thing. And second, that it was happening during Chinese New Year, which is the greatest human migration of every year. Hundreds of millions of people moving around. So as soon as that news broke, it was like, okay, yeah, this is going to be global. The question was not whether or not it was going to spread to every country, but how bad the death rate would be, which we talked about last time. And we'll look at that as well in a second. So the CDC is taking this seriously, which is great. Which is great news. Now, specifically, some of the tips that they're giving, some of the guidance, which I think is really good, can be seen from this part of the article here. This is taken from the BBC. They're basically saying the same thing that we talked about a couple videos ago, finding ways to decrease your interaction with other people face-to-face. So video conferencing, telephone conferencing, doing teleworking or teleconferencing for schools if it's possible, just trying to move as much activity online as possible. There was even an example of this that was really kind of interesting in South Korea. There's a lot of these popular K-pop bands, and one, BTS, who was going to have this big concert. They actually decided to cancel the concert and then live stream it. So that's another example of this. Move your event online. There's no reason, and there's really no excuse for getting this many people together at this point in time. It's just too dangerous. So that kind of thing is really good. Great advice from the CDC. However, there is something also in this article that is a little worrisome, and I understand that the CDC doesn't want to cause panic. They want to kind of let this thing build incrementally and give guidance as needed without creating mass hysteria. I get that. But there is something in this news bit that I think is a little bit misleading. Here it says the CDC's Principal Deputy Director, N. Shuchat, I guess I'm saying her name right, she said that we could consider this a bad flu year, or even the 2009 epidemic. And she's referring to the H1N1, or the swine flu. But the swine flu only had a final death rate of 0.02%. That's very, very low. The seasonal flu is higher than that, and this thing clearly is much higher than the seasonal flu. So I think it should be considered to be worse, be a little bit more fearful of this than the swine flu. But of course, the swine flu was scary because it spread basically around the globe and infected 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people, depending on who you ask. So that's very bad. And if this gets to that bad, then we're looking at very, very, very high fatality numbers. Hopefully it doesn't get to that point. But that's just something to keep in mind. When I saw that, I thought that's a little bit misleading. But everything else in the article was very good. In line with this, another headline I saw that was good. This is on Yahoo News, which typically tends to be a tabloid type news thing. Who's getting married? Who's buying a poodle? All this kind of thing. But Yahoo had an article which was very good. San Francisco's mayor has declared a state of emergency as the coronavirus continues to spread. That's very proactive thinking, going ahead and declaring that. Now, whether people will take it seriously or not, it's hard to say. People tend to be very complacent when there's not an immediate threat in front of them. But hopefully this will get people to kind of pay attention to this news and do some research and find out how bad this thing could possibly be. So this is all good news in my book. These are all things that are helping people to get their mind focused on the imminent threat. Now, how bad this is going to be, it'll be very much dependent on what actions they take personally, what action their school, their business, their city takes. But this is really a step in the right direction, so I was really relieved to see this, because I've been waiting for this kind of news to break for a while, watching here in China, watching the US. Now, just some more tips to keep in mind about protecting yourself. We've mentioned a few things. If you want to go back to the 8th update, we talked about doing more video conferencing, trying to figure out ways to get your life online, get it in your house so that you don't have to be out and about. If you can, work at home, school at home. And then in the last video, we had some other tips about just financial investments, not making any big investments, not getting into debt right now. It's a scary time. The stock market is taking a hit. Some other things that you can do, very practical, simple things to do, is to practice social distancing, which is what they call it. These epidemic mitigation experts, they call it social distancing, and it is exactly what it sounds like, putting distance between you and other people that are not in your immediate family. So that would include not doing things like shaking hands, hugging, kissing. These types of greetings might be very common where you are, but it would be wise to stop for a while. being very cognizant of touching your face. There have been a lot of comments on the previous vids about the masks. And a lot of people say, oh, the masks don't do anything for you, and this kind of thing. And it's true, the mask is not going to block out the actual virus because it's so small. But what a mask does is it prevents you from touching your face, which is what I mentioned in these videos. So anything on your face is going to prevent you from making that contact with fomites, the surfaces that the virus could be on, and then touching your face. So if you don't want to wear a mask, or if you can't get a mask, then just be really cognizant. We tend to touch our face several times a minute. I think it's once every 20 seconds is the average. So that's hundreds of thousands of times in a week. That's the tens of thousands of times each day. So you do it without thinking about it. You touch your face, you touch your nose, you lean on your hand, this kind of thing. So being really cognizant of that, and the best way to do that is to have something covering your face, like a mask, even if it's a cheap mask. Also, just washing your hands more with warm water and soap, using sanitizers. If you don't have one, getting a pack of sanitizer or a little bottle of sanitizer, and just getting in the habit of washing your hands or disinfecting your hands frequently, every 10 minutes, say, every 15 minutes. And that's a really good way to increase your chances of not contracting this thing. So just some small tips. I have to go to Korea tomorrow, so that's going to be an interesting experience. The way it works here in China for foreigners is you can't just stay for an extended period of time. You have to frequently leave the country. Every couple of months or every few months you have to leave the country. So tomorrow is my day. I got my ticket a couple months ago, so I'm going to be going to Korea. Nothing can be done about that now, and I'll just be really, really careful. And I fortunately do have eye protection now. I have a mask. I'm going to wear a hat and just try to keep myself insulated as possible. But hopefully won't have any big issues coming back. So anyway, that's an update on what's happening here, what's happening around the world. Hopefully you're still healthy. Hopefully you're not showing any symptoms. And hopefully you're thinking of some of the things we've talked about and taking steps, because as the CDC said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We'll see you next time.